It is now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Philippe Benoit, Head of the Energy Efficiency and Environment Division of the International Energy Agency. Mr. Benoit, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Buenos dias, bonjour, ni hao, bon dia, good afternoon, and many other hellos. It is a pleasure to be here with you, in particular at this UN event. My father worked at the United Nations for many years, and I attended the United Nations International School in New York. My high school graduation ceremony was held in the UN General Assembly, which was cool. So I'm very glad to be able to participate in today's event, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I would like to talk to you about what I and many others see as one of the big challenges of our time, climate change. I want to talk to you about this issue because, to be frank, we will need your help over the upcoming years to meet this challenge. During the next several minutes, I will present this climate change challenge in the context of the story of someone from my generation, my boss, Maria van der Hoeven, who heads my agency. And I will talk about how her personal story and her past, and in the same way my story and my past, connect to your story and your future. I hope that through this tale, I can convey why we are falling short in dealing with climate change, and why your engagement going forward is so important. I will start at the very beginning of Maria's story. She was born in 1949. The world did not know about climate change then, but it did know a lot about the horrors of war. The loss of life during World War II was staggering, as was the destruction. As you know, the United Nations was created to try to prevent that type of war from occurring again, and also to help the world to rebuild and to help poorer countries to develop. At that time, the population of the world was about 2.6 billion people. These rebuilding and development efforts were powered by energy in its various forms, in particular fossil fuels. Oil, gas, and coal were needed to grow economies, to secure food and water supplies, to improve education and health services, to fight poverty. As you know, burning oil, coal, and gas produces carbon dioxide. Back then, the world produced about 7 billion tons of carbon dioxide per year from burning these fossil fuels. That is 7 GT, as you see on the slide, or gigatons. In the 1960s, Maria, my boss, was about the same age as you are now, and I was about 4 years old. The 60s was a time of social change and of questioning established thought. It also marked a key period of decolonization, with many new countries gaining independence. War, poverty, civil rights, as well as the threat of nuclear war were the challenges that I and my friend were raised on. By the 70s, the issue of the environment started to take hold. The United Nations held the Stockholm Conference, the first major UN conference on international environmental issues. And this is around when you were born. So, as you can see, for your entire lifetime, this problem of climate change has been one that governments have been trying to solve. But, like you, this effort is somewhat young. An important international measure adopted in the 90s was the Kyoto Protocol, the first binding agreement for developed countries to limit their greenhouse gas emissions. At this point, let me briefly move away from this story timeline to take a few moments to describe what we mean by climate change. One reason we, at my energy agency, are particularly attentive to this issue of climate change is because the energy sector generates 60% of human greenhouse gas emissions. As a consequence, energy policies will affect climate, and climate policies will affect how we use energy. Now, going back to my storyline, in 2011, Maria became the head of the IEA, and I joined as the head of the Environment Division. Today, when we look back over the last 30 years, there is a lot of good news. The world has made spectacular progress with some of the challenges of my youth. In 1981, over half of the world's population lived on less than $1.25 a day. Today, this has been reduced to about a quarter. In East Asia, including China, the extreme poverty rate was 81% in 1981. It has fallen to about 18%. That is a big change in the lives of hundreds of millions of people. To enable the growing global population to live better, to enable emerging economies to emerge, and to enable OECD countries to expand have gone hand in hand with increased energy consumption. And this has led to dramatically increasing levels of carbon dioxide emissions. We are now 7 billion people, producing around 30 billion tons of carbon dioxide each year. We are putting more and more pressure on the Earth to continue to provide for us in the same ways it has in the past. If we continue on our current path of energy use, we are on track for a world which is 4 degrees warmer. What would this mean? Some of the impacts are listed here. With an increasing temperature of 4 degrees, we would see a drastic change in how the world looks. 4 degrees warming would mean hundreds of millions of people displaced by sea level rise. It would mean food shortages arising from failing crop yields and water scarcity. In a 4-degree world, coral reefs will have stopped growing and started dissolving, which will disrupt the ocean ecosystems upon which so many depend. There would be many other changes which scientists are still evaluating. While no nation will be immune from the impacts of climate change, these impacts are likely to have greater consequences for the world's poor that have less economic and technical capacity to cope and adapt. But even wealthier parts of the world will face important damages and expenses, from droughts to more intense hurricanes to the destructive impact of sea level rise on coastal cities. It is up to us to choose how much climate change we want to allow. Remember that the price of oil has gone up dramatically over the last 10 years. And so we can save a lot of money over the long run by being more efficient. The second key driver is to shift dramatically to renewables that produce virtually no emissions. When we at the IEA explore how to reduce emissions, we look at actions in the key energy consuming sectors: electricity, transport, buildings, and industry. Now, many of the actions I'm going to describe that we propose will be familiar to you. In electricity, we need to replace fuel-based production with renewable energy sources, like solar and wind. By 2050, we need renewables to supply more than half of our electricity. That's the green section on the graph. In the transport sector, we need to build and use more efficient vehicles. We also need to shift to lower carbon modes of transport, including mass transit, bicycles, and walking. This will require redesigning some of our cities. Buildings consume a lot of the energy we produce, actually about 40%, and we can do a lot to reduce related emissions. We need to build more efficient new buildings that require less energy to heat, cool, and light. This is particularly true in developing countries, where most of the buildings that will exist in 2050 are yet to be built. We're now targeting 2015 for a new global climate change treaty that will include legal commitments for all countries to put emissions on track towards the 2-degree goal. But whatever is agreed internationally, the actual delivery of emissions reductions will be made through policy action at the national and local levels. The IEA just released what we call 25 Bright Ideas to help people address the ways in which they can be more energy efficient in their day-to-day living. You can visit the IEA website to check out this information as well as some of the other graphs I put up. Talk to your parents, to your teachers, to your friends. Reach out to your community leaders and politicians. Getting involved is key. Share what you know with the people you know. It's one of the ways we can encourage change. Communicating through our networks will help us to learn more about developments on the climate change challenge, as well as to share information on solutions. Don't underestimate your growing ability to influence. You are in high school, and over the next 5 to 7 years, you will become young adults. And so, as a group, you have a growing importance. As time passes and we continue to hesitate,
The urgency grows, and we face a need for increasingly dramatic steps to counterbalance our high emissions. But time for action remains. To be successful, we must partner better across generations. We need a forceful engagement from your generation to build the resolve within my generation to increase our efforts, to heighten our ambition. You have a growing power to affect change, and we need you to use that power. Right now, your future is largely unwritten. When you reach my age, when you and your generation are the senior leaders of the world, what changes will you want to have witnessed? What will you want to share with your children, and that they, in return, share with their children? Let me conclude by stressing that a cleaner future is within our collective reach. We are now at a point when we understand the climate change challenge and the needed solutions. Much is being done already, but so much more needs to be done. We need ambition and strong action, and we need your engagement over the years to come to get there. And so that by the time you are my age,